All right, so I want you to imagine a world where team sports does not exist. In fact, no sports exist. A society like today with zero sports. What would that be like? And then this society or someone within the society has this great idea about sports and say, hey, we should introduce sports to the world. Let's create and design a sport that is going to be a successful media property, that is going to grow in popularity, and of course, be a great business application. So we're taking the society as it is today and introducing sports to it. And my main argument that I want to make is that if you were to do that and want to be successful, there's no way that sport, if it were a team sport, wouldn't be a co-ed team sport. There's a few main reasons for this. And the first has more to do with the era of society that we live in, because most team sports were invented in a very different world than we live today. So for example, in 1800s, when most team sports were invented, women weren't even allowed to vote. Equality wasn't really a thing. Women weren't involved with politics or the workplace near as much, if at all. And just a crazy different societal situation when these sports were created, and therefore developed under conditions that don't really make sense today. Today, there's a ton more collaboration, equality, and it would just be a lot more normal to think, hey, we should include both men and women when designing a game. It just would make more sense that way. But when you talk about it from a business perspective, from a media property perspective, there's no reason that you would alienate half of your, or roughly half of your potential audience by only including one gender. Because if you're creating something that's an entertainment property, you want as wide a range of athlete and types of people so that there's always a characteristic that people can connect with or appreciate or see themselves in, or find a reason to root for a specific player, to win and to be competitive, etc. So if you design a sport around a single gender, you're alienating a lot of people from finding that natural connection that they can get excited about and get behind related to the sport. So I know the biggest argument is going to be, but what about the physical differences between men and women? Yes, they exist. And what I'm saying is it's really not that hard to design a sport around those physical differences. And a perfect example is American football. There's a lot of different body types, a lot of different abilities within American football, and it all coordinates well in a game that's super compelling and one of the most popular in the world. So it can be done. It's just the difference is it's never been done with men and women. So we think our natural tendency as a society is to make that separation when in fact it doesn't really make sense anymore. And that's my main argument. But that's really just the beginning. There's actually a ton of reasons why co-ed team sports are better. When you put your kids in team sports, you typically will do so, A, because you have a connection with the sport, but B, if you let the kid decide what sport they want to play in, it's because they get a lot of benefits in development in learning how to play with others, how to develop their own skills, how to compete, how to win and lose, how to communicate and fit in with a group of people, because those skills are obviously going to translate into everything you do in life. So if you're trying to develop your child's ability, and it's just relating to children, but this translates into being a spectator and an adult performer as well. But if the main benefit you put your child in for is dealing with those around them and the ability and efficiency in doing so, it would actually make a lot more sense to have both men and women included, because that's a lot more like real life. So you're actually going to have more applicable skills developed when you include a more realistic situation. And this kind of translates into it's a more accurate representation of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Men and women are together all the time in the workplace, in families, in lots of different situations. So from a human interest perspective, the reason that you watch team sports, and one of the reasons it's so compelling, is because all of the different roles on a team must come together and mesh and gel together effectively to put on the best performance. And so this is one of the reasons I believe that American football is so popular, is because you have one of the widest range of abilities, roles in the team, body types, personalities, because every role is so different in what they have to do, that it creates a very, diverse requirement for a team. And that's really interesting to see. It also provides a lot more opportunity for, again, somebody to connect with that has characteristics that they relate to or appeal to. And so the wider the range of team members, the more interesting it is to see them have to work together. So putting men and women together on the same team widens that range by roughly double, because you have every variation within the gender, and then you have, men and women tend to deal with things a little differently. It creates a different requirement in coaching, because you have a wider range of personalities, and things that you do and say with men might not work with women, and vice versa. So it creates more interesting strategic requirements for coaching. And on the coaching topic, it's very rare in society today for women to coach men, but not in Grid League. It's actually very common, and it just makes a more interesting dynamic. This novelty, as Grid League becomes more and more popular, will wear off. But right now, it's certainly very interesting to see. And the other interesting part is the last two championship teams in our league have women coaches. The biggest reason, and this is probably not news from anybody that's listened to me talk about Grid League at any length, is the fact that romantic relationships are more common when you have men and women together in team sports. And why is this important? You watch sports for the storylines. You watch sports for the drama. You watch for the conflict. You watch for what happens in the locker room, the things that are said, the moves that the coaches make. And all of that is times two when you have both men and women on the team. And you have to deal with relationships as a part of the dynamic of the sport. So when you have cross-team relationships, how do you coach around that? What's being said amongst the couple off of the grid? Do teammates have questions about that? Are secrets being shared? Those kinds of things. Inter-team relationships, coach to player, player to player, and having to deal with the inevitable conflicts and situations that arise with romantic relationships, or the breakdown of romantic relationships, and how that's dealt with on a team level. And every variation of the stage of relationship has existed within our version of Grid League. Just imagine when there's a lot more teams. And so the storylines are just so much more interesting and dramatic. They're much more reminiscent of reality TV. And I want to share a quick story that cemented in my mind why this is so important. And, back in the day, I won't get into the full story of how I was in this situation, but I was the GM of one of the first Grid League teams ever. And in the team house that we had all of the team members there, and it was kind of like we had practice that day. Everybody was relaxed. There was a grill going on, and just there was different groups of interactions happening in different places around the house. And it was everything. It was like every dramatic situation that you could think of. So there was, that rumored couple hiding in the bedroom. There was a girl crying in the corner and a guy trying to console her over, some sort of thing that was said in a given situation. There was guys getting into it a little bit because they were butting heads about something that happened earlier in the day. And then there was women kind of like coming together and, kind of leading the household and like the mom type situation. So it was just all these different dynamics going on at once of like real life. None of them would happen if men and women weren't together. So if you had a reality TV camera in one of these team houses in a situation that was anything close to what I had, it would be the most popular and compelling reality TV show on the planet. So when I was sitting there just in this house, like I'm by myself sitting on the couch, just taking it all in, looking around and being like, this is insane that this doesn't exist yet. And I'm all in. And that was just like cemented in my brain that if we were able to allow this to develop and shine a light on it, that there's no way this isn't going to be a really important and compelling part of society someday. And that's a big statement, but I just believe that as society becomes more and more wise to what can happen on a team sport with men and women together on it, that we're not going to be the only one. There's going to be lots of sports that spring up when it's discovered that it's a better model for sports. It just feels really foreign right now because it's not how we've done things as a society. There's always been this segregation between men and women in sports. And really not that long ago, men and women weren't, women weren't even allowed to vote, which is insane to think about these days. It's just leftover thought processes that exist in society that make it feel weird to have men and women on the same team. And you look at our comment section and you see that remnants of outdated thought processes that exist and react when they see men and women competing directly with one another and together. So, when you really think about it, I think it's easy to see, but you have to really think about it. And you have to get out of what we're used to really understand it. So this is something obviously that, my sister and I are really passionate about, and a lot of people that are passionate about the sport really believe in as well, probably because they've seen something that fits into, the realm of the story that I just told and understand how compelling that is. So our job is to tell that story more. And we're doing the best that we can, because we don't want to be the TMZ of Grid League, but there will be a TMZ of Grid League. And it's going to be, something that lights the sport on fire in my mind. So, those are some personal thoughts about it. And I'd be super interested to hear what you have to say and what you think. Am I talking crazy? Is what I'm saying making sense? So let me know. Thanks for listening.